December 14th, 2000. Callahan, Florida. After picking up a prescription from a pharmacy, 51-year-old Jackie Markham returns home from work, but she vanishes without a trace, and the prescription is found on the front seat of her car inside the garage. Jackie's boyfriend, Archie Carroll, claims she phoned him to say that a drunk man named Richard had unexpectedly shown up at her house. But by the time Archie drove over there to check on her, Jackie was gone. Investigators explore a number of different leads, including the possibility that Jackie was harmed by a suspected serial killer or even Archie himself. But there is no evidence of what happened, and Jackie remains a missing person. After that, the trail went cold.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of The Trail Went Cold. I'm your host Robin Warder, and today we're going to be covering an unsolved missing persons case which was once featured on the true crime TV show Disappeared, the 2000 disappearance of Jackie Markham. That voice you just heard narrating our intro was Ryan Sheesley, the latest winner of our most recent Trail Went Cold listener voiceover contest, so thank you very much, Ryan. This is a recurring monthly contest which we've been carrying on for 8.5 years now, so if you'd like to enter and haven't already done so, I will be providing instructions near the end of this episode. Anyway, the Jackie Markham case was covered on the 5th season of Disappeared in an episode titled Wrong Side of the Tracks, and out of all the cases featured on the show, this is one that seems to have some of the least amount of evidence to work with. At the time she went missing, Jackie Markham was a 51-year-old mother of 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren who had gotten divorced from her second husband 1 year earlier, but she now had her own house and successful career as the general manager of a trucking company and had been dating a number of different men. On the night she went missing, Jackie supposedly had a date scheduled with one of her boyfriends, Archie Carroll, but he claimed that Jackie phoned him up at the last minute and said that an intoxicated man named Richard had unexpectedly shown up at her residence. Archie said that he immediately drove over to Jackie's house, but by the time he arrived, there was no sign of her or this mysterious Richard, yet Jackie's car and most of her personal belongings were left behind, and there were no signs of struggle or foul play. It turned out that there was another man in Jackie's life named Richard, but he denied any involvement in her disappearance and seemed to have a solid alibi that night. The investigation eventually led to a suspected serial killer who was living in the area and was responsible for at least 2 other murders during that time period, but he also denied any involvement and there was no evidence to implicate him either. Suspicion would be directed at Archie himself, as he was known for being possessive towards Jackie, and investigators wondered if he might have completely fabricated his story about Jackie's final phone call. But once again, other than some odd behavior, there was no evidence to implicate Archie. The consensus from law enforcement and Jackie's family is that she did not disappear voluntarily and became the victim of foul play, but the responsible party seemed to do a very effective job at covering their tracks, which is why this remains unsolved over 25 years later, so we're going to look at all the potential scenarios on today's episode. However, before we get started, just a quick reminder that The Trail Went Cold is a weekly podcast, which is currently available for download on several platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Podcast Addict, and more. So if you like this podcast, be sure to subscribe to it, and please leave us a rating or review on any of those sites to help spread the word. The Trail Went Cold is on Patreon, so if you would like to learn how to support the show, please visit our page at patreon.com/thetrailwentcold. For as little as $1 a month, you can garner access to exclusive rewards, including stickers and thank you cards, early access to episodes, and bonus content. as our Patreon page has over 90 exclusive bonus episodes in our archives which are not available on our regular feed. So with all that out of the way, let us now explore the murder of Jackie Markham. Our story begins in Florida in 2000, and our central figure is 51-year-old Jacqueline Lorraine Markham, who goes by the name Jackie. Jackie actually married her first husband at the young age of 15 and went on to have a son and 2 daughters by the age of 20, and she would raise her family in Jacksonville. By the end of the 1970s, Jackie had gotten divorced from her first husband, but a few years later, she got remarried to her second husband, Larry Markham, and worked alongside him at a trucking firm he owned. Jackie and Larry had what was described as a complex relationship, as they got divorced at one point, but continued living together for several more years before they decided to get remarried again. They eventually split up for the second time, and while Larry claimed that Jackie openly expressed some regret about this and wanted to start over with him, their divorce ultimately went through and was finalized during the fall of 1999. Jackie decided to relocate to the small town of Callahan, which is located in Nassau County about 20 miles northwest of Jacksonville and had a population of just under 1,000 people at that time. Jackie bought her own house on Hive Lane in the Spring Lake Estates neighborhood and got a job as the general manager of Cheetah Transportation, another trucking firm in Jacksonville, where she developed a reputation for being a skilled and devoted workaholic who almost never took vacations. By this point, Jackie's 3 children are all grown up and live in Central Florida, as her son, Scott Neesmith, is married and has 2 young sons. Her oldest daughter, Lisa Chatner-Carr, is married, and her youngest daughter, Melissa Neesmith, is engaged. Jackie maintains close relationships with her children and grandchildren, and since her divorce, she has enjoyed the process of dating a number of different men. One of them is a 57-year-old truck driver named Archie Carroll, whom she has been involved with for 10 months, and Jackie's family would meet him for the first time while visiting her for Thanksgiving. According to Archie, Jackie did not have much interest in getting remarried again, and there were times when it seemed like she was more invested in having a close friendship rather than a serious relationship. In spite of this, Archie and Jackie are still close enough that she has given him a key to her house. On the evening of December the 14th, Jackie left work early in order to run some errands, as she told her coworkers that she wasn't feeling well and her back was hurting. She stopped at a Kmart, as well as the Eckerd Pharmacy at the Winn-Dixie Shopping Center in Callahan, in order to pick up a prescription for some medication she took to regulate her high blood pressure, and a time-stamped receipt would later show that it was purchased at 6:51 p.m. But shortly thereafter, Jackie would become a missing person. Jackie and Archie supposedly had a date scheduled that night, and according to Archie, just before he was about to leave his residence, he got a phone call from Jackie at around 7:05 p.m. She told Archie that a male acquaintance named Richard had unexpectedly arrived at her house and was intoxicated. Even though Jackie told Archie not to come over and it sounded like she was about to cancel their date, Archie said he got the feeling that she was under duress, so he told Jackie that he was going to drive to her place as he did not want this Richard to ruin their evening. Jackie told Archie that this was okay and asked him to control his temper when he arrived, before their call ended. Well, Archie claimed that he then drove over to Jackie's house, but by the time he arrived, there was no sign of Jackie or the male acquaintance named Richard. Archie said that he was not initially concerned, as he wondered if Jackie may have driven Richard home on her own to avoid a possible confrontation, but he soon realized that Jackie's car was still parked inside her garage. While there were no signs of any struggle or violence inside the residence, Archie noticed that Jackie's purse and cell phone were gone. When Archie attempted to call Jackie on her cell phone, he said there was no answer, so he decided to spend the night at Jackie's house in case she returned, but she never did. When morning hit, Archie phoned Jackie's daughter Lisa, as well as her office at Cheetah Transportation, but they had not heard from her either. In fact, one of Jackie's co-workers at Cheetah Transportation would contact her other daughter, Melissa, to let her know that she had not shown up for her scheduled shift and failed to contact anyone, which was very out of character. Archie finally became concerned enough to call the Nassau County Sheriff's Office in order to officially report Jackie missing. Jackie's family were particularly perturbed by her absence, as the following day, December the 16th, she had been planning to take a rare vacation by traveling to Tampa in order to visit her son Scott and stay with them for a week. Jackie's two grandsons had been born on Christmas Day and December the 26th, respectively, so the family was planning to hold a birthday party for them and celebrate an early Christmas together. Since Jackie's children found it unlikely that she would voluntarily disappear right before this trip and make no attempt to contact them, they immediately traveled to Jacksonville in order to speak with law enforcement and help search for her. When Jackie's family and the Nassau County Sheriff's Office performed a search of her residence, they discovered that most of her personal belongings, including her pet Cocker Spaniel puppy Freckles and pet Fish, had been left behind, as the only items which appeared to be missing were Jackie's purse, cell phone, and the clothing she wore to work right before she disappeared. Her Christmas tree was in the midst of being decorated, as Jackie and Archie had started working on it on December the 12th, but she never finished the job. The prescription that Jackie had picked up from Eckert's pharmacy was on the passenger seat of her car inside the garage, which caused even more concern, since she needed this medication to control her blood pressure. According to Archie, Jackie had a habit of leaving her house unlocked and her garage door open whenever she went out, which caused him to speculate that someone may have been waiting inside the garage when Jackie arrived home. But since the jewelry which Jackie had worn to work for her final shift was found inside a porcelain dish near the kitchen sink, this seemed to indicate that she had gone inside the residence at some point before something happened. While there was no blood or any noticeable signs of foul play, there were some empty beer cans on the lawn in the backyard, as well as some tire tracks which led into a wooded area. Since a road named Bismarck Road ran behind these woods, it was suspected that if Jackie was abducted, the perpetrator may have parked their vehicle there and used this route to enter the property. Multiple witnesses recalled having seen a dark-colored pickup truck at Jackie's residence on the afternoon of December the 14th, in the hours before she arrived home, but this truck was never tracked down or identified. Even though Jackie's residence was sealed off as a crime scene, it was reportedly not processed as thoroughly for fingerprints or other forensic evidence as it should have been, so no conclusive evidence was found which belonged to an outside party. Following her disappearance, there would be no activity on Jackie's cell phone, credit cards, bank account, or social security number, so there was nothing to indicate that she was still alive following the night of her disappearance. A massive search effort was launched for Jackie, as her family would look all over the area for her and circulate thousands of missing persons flyers. They also set up a website for Jackie in order to spread awareness of her disappearance, and an email address was set up in which to receive tips. Todd Myrick, the fiancé of Jackie's daughter Melissa, became the official family spokesperson and told the media that they feared she had become the victim of foul play. Jackie failed to resurface by Christmas, and her family had to face the ordeal of receiving a number of holiday packages and mail she had sent to them before she went missing. In Jackie's absence, her children paid her mortgage and bills on her behalf and took care of her dog, as well as a rental property she had in Georgia. The sheriff's office would not actually let them back into her house until April of 2001, and they would be treated to the sight of a half-decorated Christmas tree, which was now covered in cobwebs. On December the 19th, 5 days after Jackie went missing, her purse was discovered in a ditch on Evergreen Avenue in a rough neighborhood in Jacksonville, located about 20 miles from her residence. The purse contained Jackie's identification and credit cards, and it did not appear that anything had been stolen from it. Since Jackie was not known to have ever visited this neighborhood, investigators wondered if someone may have intentionally placed her purse there in hopes that it would be found. While it was sent to the crime lab for analysis, the only fingerprints on the purse belonged to the man who found it. Well, in case you're wondering about Archie's story about a man named Richard having shown up at Jackie's house right before she went missing, it turned out that yes, there was someone named Richard in her personal life. Jackie did have a friendly relationship with Richard, who worked for the railroad company, CSX Transportation, and she even told her family and friends that she had gone out on a date with Richard and was interested in seeing him again. When Richard was questioned, he denied having any involvement in her disappearance and claimed he never showed up to her residence on the evening of December the 14th while he was intoxicated. Richard seemed to have a solid alibi, as two of his neighbors were able to confirm that they had dinner with him at his house that night. Richard was also in his late 60s and had undergone surgery on his eyes, which made it very difficult for him to drive at night, so there was a lot of doubt about whether he would have been able to travel to Jackie's residence and subsequently dispose of her body. Richard also agreed to pay a visit to the sheriff's office in order to take a voice stress analysis test, which he wound up passing, and he was ultimately cleared as a suspect. In spite of this, Archie continued to express his opinion that Jackie was harmed by someone who had a romantic interest in her, and during an interview with the local media, he stated, quote, "I think this is someone that liked her and wanted her company, and maybe by the fact that she went with him, it was a come-on cue or something, and maybe he tried something, and maybe it went negative. That is really my gut feeling on it," end quote. However, unlike Richard, when Archie agreed to take a voice stress analysis test, he did not pass, so he was looked at as a potential suspect. Like I mentioned earlier, Jackie and Archie had been dating for 10 months, but she was in no hurry to get married again, and Archie even admitted that the relationship had begun to cool down. According to Jackie's friends and family, Archie appeared to be possessive towards her, and when Jackie's children visited her residence for Thanksgiving, they noticed that Archie constantly followed Jackie around. It also turned out that on the 4th of July, Jackie had told Archie that she was planning to spend the holiday with a girlfriend, but she actually went to a barbecue at Richard's residence, and Archie did not react well when he found out. Jackie's loved ones suspected that she wanted to end her relationship with Archie, but just couldn't go through the process of breaking up with him. A number of people also witnessed what they perceived to be odd behavior from Archie right after Jackie went missing. On the same night she disappeared, Archie actually phoned her daughter Melissa and left a message on her answering machine, informing her that Jackie had run off with a guy named Richard. The following morning, after he called the Nassau County Sheriff's Office to report Jackie missing, Archie approached Richard Blanco, a neighbor of Jackie's who worked as a patrolman, though this was not the same Richard I referred to earlier. Archie asked Blanco if he would accompany him inside Jackie's house to help him search it, which struck Blanco as odd, since Archie told him that he had just spent the entire night inside the house by himself. Archie said that due to Blanco's job in law enforcement, he wondered if he might be able to notice something in the house that was missed the first time around, but Blanco declined to go inside, as he did not want to interfere with what was going to be an active crime scene investigation from the sheriff's office. The following day, Archie phoned one of Jackie's friends, Nelda Lee, and asked if she knew where Jackie was. When Nelda said no, Archie went off on a weird rant about how Jackie was probably in the Bahamas with her boyfriend, as he claimed that she took off all the time without letting anyone know where she was going, so he wasn't going to worry about her too much. But of course, Nelda and the rest of Jackie's friends and family disagreed with this, as she had no documented history of disappearing voluntarily. When investigators checked Jackie's cell phone records, they learned that the last call she received before she went missing was from a truck driver who wanted to know what trucking runs were scheduled for him the following day. And records show that the last call Jackie made from her cell phone took place at 6:31 p.m., as Archie claimed that he phoned her to let her know that she was running late and asked if he would pick up her prescription from the pharmacy, but Archie said he told her that since the pharmacy didn't close until 7 o'clock, she still had plenty of time to get it herself, which is what she did. Now, Archie claimed that Jackie's final phone call in which she told him about her issues with Richard was made from her house's landline to the landline at his house, but since those types of calls were not tracked by the phone company at that time, investigators were unable to turn up any record to officially verify that this call took place. But Archie was living with a roommate at the time, and the roommate recalled having seen a call come into the house phone with Jackie's number on the display on the night she went missing. When Archie was questioned by investigators, they asked if they could search the trunk of his car, and after he provided his consent, they noticed that the trunk's rug was missing. Archie claimed that it wasn't uncommon for him to take the rug in and out of the trunk, and he had recently removed it in order to dry it after something had spilled on it. Archie did eventually bring the rug to police for a forensic examination, but it did not contain any incriminating evidence. While Archie was described as initially being very cooperative with investigators, it wasn't long before he stopped speaking with them and hired a lawyer to communicate on his behalf. Well, the investigation would soon go in a completely different direction when a 40-year-old transient named Ross Lane Emerson popped up on the radar as a potential suspect. Emerson originally hailed from Fort Worth, Texas, and had an extensive criminal history, as in 1984, he attacked a woman during a home invasion in Tyler and received a 60-year prison sentence for burglary with intent to commit sexual assault. Emerson only wound up serving 15 years before he was paroled in August of 1999, and he was forced to wear an ankle monitor and register as a sex offender. But at some point, Emerson cut off his ankle monitor and fled the state in order to travel to Florida. On January the 5th, 2001, the nude body of Katrina Lavnette Benson, a 31-year-old sex worker from Jacksonville, was found in a ditch near a logging road in the community of Yulee. She had been severely beaten over the head with a blunt object and had 43 stab wounds on her body, mostly around the neck area. Benson was last seen climbing into an Oldsmobile which had been reported stolen by its owner, and the vehicle was eventually tracked down to the parking lot of a Winn-Dixie store over 350 miles away in Miami. A man using a fake identification under the name Jasper Dunbar was arrested at this store after he was caught trying to steal some razor blades and cut the store manager on the arm with a knife during a struggle. Of course, it turned out that Jasper Dunbar was actually Ross Lane Emerson, and he was extradited back to Nassau County to be questioned about Katrina Benson's murder. Emerson eventually confessed to the crime, as well as the murder of 46-year-old Robert Louis Jones, who was stabbed to death inside his home in Jacksonville on January the 1st, 4 days before Benson's murder. Emerson was looked at as a possible serial killer, as he was also questioned about the murder of 46-year-old Billie Jean Levette, who was found murdered in a wooded area near Savannah, Georgia on November the 20th, 2000. But other than the 2 murders from Jacksonville, Emerson did not admit to any additional crimes, and he would be held at the Nassau County Jail and Detention Center to await trial. Well, Emerson was also investigated for potential involvement in Jackie Markham's disappearance, as it turned out that the spot in Jacksonville where Jackie's purse was found was only a few blocks away from an abandoned railroad boxcar which Emerson had been living in during that time period. Emerson could also be placed in Callahan on the exact day Jackie went missing, as he had worked as a day laborer there and, interestingly enough, signed up for the job under the fake name Richard Hubbard. Emerson was extensively questioned about Jackie's disappearance by Tommy Reeves, the lead detective from the Nassau County Sheriff's Office, but even though he was very open and forthcoming while admitting to his involvement in the murders of Katrina Benson and Robert Louis Jones, he continually denied being responsible for what happened to Jackie. Sometime in September, Emerson sent Detective Reeves a handwritten 3-page letter in which he told Reeves that he respected him and wanted him to know the full truth, and it contained this line, quote, "I honestly know nothing about your Markham case," end quote. A few weeks later, during the early morning hours of October the 1st, Emerson died after hanging himself with a piece of cloth and a metal wire in his jail cell. Detective Reeves openly expressed his belief that Emerson was telling the truth, as he told the media, quote, "I really believe he was sincere. If you saw the confessions he made, you'd see how sincere. He let it all come out, as long as it pertained to things we knew about," end quote. Jackie's family also came to believe that Emerson had nothing to do with what happened to her, as they were inclined to think that she was harmed by someone she knew. In December of 2001, around the 1-year anniversary of Jackie's disappearance, a memorial service was held at Ponte Vedra Presbyterian Church by Jacksonville's Justice Coalition, a non-profit victims advocacy group. The service was attended by the families of 6 missing victims from Florida, including Jackie Markham and Tina McQuaig, who had gone missing from Jacksonville on March the 15th, 2000, and her case was also covered on an episode of Disappeared, as well as episode number 423 of The Trail Went Cold. The Justice Coalition would also put up a billboard alongside Interstate 10 containing the photographs of all 6 missing victims. Jackie's family later joined another nonprofit organization called Families of Missing Loved Ones, and within the next 3 years, Jackie's daughters, Melissa and Lisa, would have children of their own. In January of 2012, this case would be featured on an episode of the true crime TV series Disappeared, titled Wrong Side of the Tracks. In July of 2013, the new detective on the case, Jeff Stahl, announced that they were planning to retest some of the evidence found at Jackie's house, as well as conduct new tests on additional evidence. Stahl said that he felt the new testing might point to a person of interest, stating, quote, "I do believe there was some jealousy spurned. There were some arguments between her and Archie Carroll. From what I understand, he's very demanding. He shows up unannounced. Some of the past girlfriends we've spoken to, he's made threats to," end quote. Investigators said they were planning to re-interview Archie once the tests were completed, but he continued to deny any involvement in Jackie's disappearance. By February of 2019, another lead detective from the Nassau County Sheriff's Office named Mark Murdoch had been assigned to the case, and he spoke during a news segment which was produced by First Coast News. Murdoch stated, quote, "Archie Carroll is the boyfriend and considered a suspect because he was the boyfriend. He wanted more, but Jackie didn't," end quote. The news segment also revealed that Jackie's family felt that Archie's story about Jackie being hassled by a man named Richard was, quote-unquote, far-fetched. Her son-in-law, Todd Myrick, stated, quote, "Knowing a perfectionist is probably not planning on having a date the night before she is going out of town for a week and hasn't finished decorating her Christmas tree. So a lot of things didn't, quite add up in our minds," end quote. While First Coast News attempted to reach out to Archie, he left a voicemail for the lead reporter in which he confirmed that his lawyer had advised him to no longer comment on the case, though he still continued to maintain that his original story was true and he had nothing to do with what happened to Jackie. In June of 2020, Archie passed away at the age of 67, leaving behind 5 children and 4 grandchildren. Even though law enforcement has openly directed suspicion towards Archie, it's worth noting that they have always lacked the evidence to formally declare him a suspect or person of interest. However, if you go to the Nassau County Sheriff's Office website, they have a cold cases section with a profile page for Jackie's disappearance, and while it mentions her alleged phone call to Archie, it also contains this line, quote, "Telephone records indicate the telephone call did not take place," end quote. Well, in December of 2022, there would be one more interesting development, as the Nassau County Sheriff's Office publicly released a surveillance video which had been overlooked during the original investigation. According to detectives, shortly before noon on December the 30th, 2000, just over 2 weeks after Jackie went missing, a security camera at the Lil Champ convenience store on Lem Turner Road in Callahan captured an unidentified white male wearing a black jacket, burgundy scarf, and blue jeans walking into the store before he approached the clerk and pointed to a missing persons flyer which had been posted for Jackie. The man told the clerk that they needed to search the woods behind Jackie's house, and he then left without making a purchase, and he apparently then went into a nearby Sprint cell phone store featuring Jackie's flyer and did the exact same thing. The sheriff's office hoped that someone might watch the surveillance video and recognize the man, and while investigators did not consider him to be a suspect, they felt he might have information about the case, so they wanted to question him. This man has still not been identified, and after more than 25 years, there are no conclusive answers about what happened to Jackie Markham. So I guess you could say, the trail went cold. So I consider this to be one of the more underrated cases featured on Disappeared, because even though it is still unsolved to this day and Jackie Markham has never been found, I don't see much discussion about the case online. By all accounts, Jackie was a very reliable person who had close relationships with her children and grandchildren and was considered to be a model employee, so I think the chances of her disappearing voluntarily are pretty much non-existent, and the most likely explanation is that she was harmed by someone a short time after she returned home after picking up her prescription at the pharmacy. The prescription is pretty much the last verified accounts of Jackie's movements because the events which supposedly occurred afterward are based solely on the account of her boyfriend, Archie Carroll, but there's been some question about whether or not he is a reliable narrator. Truthfully, when I first learned the details about this case, I took Archie's story at face value and wondered if perhaps Jackie's ex-husband might have been responsible for her disappearance. To recap, Jackie's marriage took place when she was only 15 years old, which is definitely a red flag, and she had all 3 of her children before she turned 20, but there isn't any information about her first husband, as his name has never even been released publicly. All we know is that he and Jackie divorced sometime in the late 1970s, so I'm guessing he was no longer a major part of Jackie's life by the time she went missing. But I was always curious about her second husband, Larry Markham, as they divorced just over a year before her disappearance. It sounds like Jackie and Larry had a very unique on-again, off-again relationship, as they already got divorced on one prior occasion before they changed their mind and decided to get remarried, as I get the impression that they genuinely cared about each other, but realized that having a relationship where they constantly lived and worked together just wasn't sustainable. The idea of Larry showing up at Jackie's house one night in an inebriated state, and her lying to Archie about it and saying it was some guy named Richard in order to avoid a possible confrontation was an intriguing possibility, but I've never seen any indication that Larry was considered to be a suspect or person of interest, so he was likely cleared by law enforcement. Besides, Larry was also interviewed on the Disappeared episode, and he still spoke of Jackie quite fondly, so it doesn't sound like he had a motive to harm her. But as the years have gone on, it's been reported that Archie seemed to have much more enthusiasm about a serious long-term relationship with Jackie than she did, and due to his possessive and controlling nature, he may have reacted badly if Jackie told him something he didn't want to hear. I just mentioned that Archie Carroll passed away in 2020, and I would love to know more details about his background before he became involved with Jackie, as his obituary said that he left behind 5 children and 4 grandchildren, and described him as a quote-unquote devoted father and grandfather. Of course, this is definitely not the first time when the obituary for a deceased potential suspect in a cold case investigation painted him in the best possible light, but given that he has never formally been named as a suspect or person of interest by law enforcement and has a number of family members out there who loved and cared about him, I don't want to accuse Archie of anything nefarious without strong evidence. But on the other hand, one of the detectives did say that Archie had a demanding personality and a history of threatening his other spouses. One of the reasons investigators became suspicious of him was because he failed a voice stress analysis test, but they are about as reliable as lie detector tests and are non-admissible in court, so I wouldn't put much stock into them. By the time the Disappeared episode came out, Archie was only speaking to law enforcement through his attorney, but he did agree to appear on camera to be interviewed on the show. Archie was pretty forthcoming about the fact that even though he and Jackie had been together for 10 months before she vanished, he felt that the relationship had cooled down, and she seemed more interested in having him as a close friend rather than a life partner. I know that Jackie dated a number of different men following her divorce, and the fact that she went out on one date with her friend Richard and was apparently interested in going out with him again is an indicator that she did not want to keep things exclusive with Archie. In fact, Jackie's family suspected that she wanted to end things with Archie, but just had a difficult time going through the process of telling him they were done. Archie always maintained that he and Jackie had a date scheduled on the night she went missing, but Jackie's family were skeptical of this, as she was planning to travel to Tampa to see them in 2 days, was preparing for one more shift at work the following day, and was also in the midst of completing some household tasks, such as finishing the decoration of her Christmas tree. According to phone records, the last call that Jackie made from her cell took place at 6:31 p.m., as Archie claimed that she asked him to pick up her prescription from the pharmacy because she was running late, but he convinced her that she still had enough time to pick it up on her own before closing. Well, we do know that Jackie picked up her prescription about 20 minutes later before she returned home, but we technically only have Archie's word about what they spoke about over the phone. And this is where it gets confusing. Archie claims that Jackie phoned him again at around 7:05 to let him know about the guy named Richard showing up at her residence, but the call was supposedly made from Jackie's house phone to Archie's house phone. The original lead detective, Tommy Reeves, was interviewed on the Disappeared episode and said he was unable to find any official record of this call, but he made it sound like this was because the phone company was unable to track local phone calls made from landlines at that time, even though they could provide a record of calls made from cell phones. So even though Detective Reeves could not verify Archie's story, he technically couldn't disprove it either. But if you visit Jackie's profile page at the Nassau County Sheriff's Office website, it contains this line, quote, "Telephone records indicate the telephone call did not take place," end quote. Does this mean they've turned up new information to prove that Archie was lying, or is the wording just very ambiguous? It's been reported that Archie had a roommate at the time who was able to verify having seen Jackie's name on the call display when a phone call came into the residence that night. But unfortunately, I've never seen the roommate publicly comment on this situation, so can we be certain that he did not simply see the call that Jackie made to Archie from her cell phone at 6:31 p.m.? Well, no matter how you look at it, Archie's story is definitely an odd one, as he claimed Jackie wanted to cancel their date and told him not to come over, but Archie said he wasn't going to let this drunk guy, Richard, ruin their evening, so he said he was going to come over anyway, and Jackie said that was fine as long as he controlled his temper. But I think that most people would agree that if your spouse calls you to say that someone has shown up at their house uninvited while drunk, you're probably going to go check if they're okay, even if they say not to come over. Granted, I suppose it's possible that Jackie had her own reasons for not wanting to see Archie that night and was making up a story to cancel their date, but if so, would it make more sense to say that you're sick or something rather than mention a drunk man showing up at your place? But on the other hand, if Archie was complicit in Jackie's disappearance, wouldn't he have been able to dream up a better cover story? Well, I guess it would depend on whether Archie had ulterior motives, because there was a Richard from Jackie's personal life whom she had already gone out on one date with and was supposedly interested in seeing again. And while Archie claimed that he never personally met Richard, it turned out that Jackie had lied to him about spending the 4th of July with a girlfriend that year when she actually went to a barbecue at Richard's house. Theoretically, if Archie killed Jackie and needed to take suspicion away from himself, he could have fabricated this entire story about a Richard showing up at her house in hopes that law enforcement would divert all their attention towards a man whom he may have considered to be his romantic rival. But if this was Archie's strategy, it wound up backfiring, since it turned out that Richard had an airtight alibi that night and was in the company of 2 witnesses who could vouch for his whereabouts, so the story only made Archie look suspicious. Now, to be fair, that doesn't necessarily mean that Archie was lying, because if a man really did show up at Jackie's house that night and learned she had a date planned, he could have very well forced Jackie to share a fake cover story with him under duress, in hopes that it would prevent Archie from coming over to her house. We don't know all that much about Richard's background, but he was an employee for the railroad company CSX Transportation, and I can't help but wonder if it's no coincidence that Jackie's purse was later found in an area of Jacksonville she had no known connection to, but happened to be in close proximity to the railroad tracks. Since the purse was left out in the open, investigators always suspected that someone wanted it to be found, and perhaps the selection of this location was a none too subtle attempt to direct suspicion towards Richard. Another odd aspect of Archie's story is how he claimed that after Jackie's phone call, he drove over to her residence and discovered that Jackie and Richard were not there, but was not initially concerned because he just figured that Jackie had driven this guy home on her own until he noticed that her car was still in the garage. You would think this may have prompted Archie to display a bit more urgency about the situation, but he said that he spent the night at Jackie's house waiting for her to return and did not contact the sheriff's office to report her missing until the following morning. And he also left an odd message on the answering machine of Jackie's daughter Melissa to say she had run off with Richard, even though there was zero evidence to suggest that she disappeared voluntarily. We know that Jackie's cell phone was never recovered, but I would be curious to know if law enforcement was able to determine if Richard attempted to call her phone at all after he noticed she was missing, even if none of the calls were actually picked up. I've seen a number of other missing persons cases in which a victim goes missing while in the midst of a controlling relationship, but their possessive spouse never attempts to call their cell phone and acts rather nonchalant about the whole situation. So yes, if it turned out that Archie never made any attempt to reach Jackie on her cell, that would look awfully suspicious. Jackie also happened to have a neighbor named Richard Blanco who worked as a patrolman and was interviewed on the Disappeared episode, but it doesn't sound like anyone ever believed he was the Richard whom Jackie supposedly mentioned during her phone call. Blanco found it strange that on the morning following Jackie's disappearance, after spending the night alone in the house, Archie asked him to accompany him inside the residence, even though he had already contacted the sheriff's office to report Jackie missing at that point. I've seen things like this occur in cases where a suspect will arrange for a witness to be with them when they, quote-unquote, discover their victim's body, but since we know Jackie's body was not in the house at that time, I'm not exactly sure why Archie would have asked Blanco to accompany him, unless he really thought this would help take suspicion off himself. In terms of alibis, even though Archie had a roommate at the time, I can only assume that this person was unable to vouch for his whereabouts, since by his own admission, Archie said that he spent the entire night alone at Jackie's house waiting for her to come home. So if he was guilty, Archie may have spent this entire time covering his tracks and disposing of crucial evidence, and no one would be able to prove or disprove this. It sounds like Jackie and Archie had a close enough relationship that she gave him a key to her house, and I find it interesting how Archie made it a point to specifically say in his Disappeared interview that Jackie was a very trusting person who would often leave her front door unlocked and her garage door open whenever she went out. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle at the residence, so once again, if Archie was the perpetrator, he may have been attempting to plant the seeds that an intruder entered the unlocked house and was already waiting for Jackie when she arrived home. Since Jackie left the prescription she picked up on the front seat of her car, this could point towards her being attacked in the garage after she pulled in, though the presence of her jewelry in a dish near the kitchen sink suggests that she went inside the house and took it off, unless someone else took off the jewelry and put it there to stage the scene. It's also been reported that Jackie had a pet Cocker Spaniel named Freckles whom she left behind, but there's no information about where exactly the dog was found when she disappeared, or if it was known for barking or reacting whenever strangers entered the residence. Obviously, since Archie was around the residence all the time, I don't think Freckles would have found it unusual or reacted if he showed up, and while the sheriff's office received some criticism for not processing the house for fingerprints or other evidence as thoroughly as they should have, the presence of Archie's fingerprints is not going to be out of the ordinary since he was a frequent visitor. The only physical evidence at the scene which pointed towards an outsider were tire tracks in the backyard, as it's been suspected that someone could have parked behind the residence and used a wooded area as an entry point from Bismarck Road. We know that Archie's car was searched at one point, since tests were performed on a rug which had been removed from his trunk, but unfortunately, I don't have any information about whether comparisons were made between the tire tracks from the backyard and the tires on Archie's vehicle. Another odd clue was the presence of empty beer cans in the backyard, which could have been left there if someone had been watching the house for a lengthy period of time and decided to drink some beer while waiting. But once again, I have no information about whether investigators attempted to perform forensic testing on these cans for the presence of fingerprints or DNA. Now, while I've spent the brunt of my analysis thus far directing suspicion towards Archie, one detail which might point away from him is the presence of a dark-colored pickup truck at Jackie's residence on the afternoon of her disappearance, as it was seen by numerous witnesses, including Richard Blanco. I have to assume that Archie did not own a pickup truck matching this description, and since it's never been identified, it could point towards an outside party watching over the house and waiting for Jackie to come home. These sightings took place during the afternoon hours, but if this person decided to park their truck behind the woods on Bismarck Road when Jackie arrived home, that could explain why no one reported seeing it during the evening hours. I think the case got a lot more complicated when Ross Lane Emerson popped up on the radar as a potential suspect, and it's not hard to imagine why he initially seemed so compelling. He was charged with 2 other murders which took place in the Jacksonville area during this time period. He could be placed in Callahan working as a day laborer on the date Jackie went missing under the pseudonym Richard Hubbard, and he lived in an abandoned railroad boxcar only a few blocks away from the spot where Jackie's purse was found. I just mentioned that if Archie intentionally fabricated the story about Jackie being harassed by a man named Richard in order to cast suspicion on someone he considered to be his romantic rival, he got very unlucky that he wound up implicating a guy who had an airtight alibi. But on the other side of the coin, he also lucked out that another murderer was operating in the area at the exact same time who was using the fake name Richard. So we know that Emerson confessed to the murder of Robert Louis Jones, who was stabbed to death inside his home on January the 1st, though his motive for that crime is not entirely clear. And then, 4 days later, Emerson picked up and brutally murdered a sex worker named Katrina Lynette Benson. Yet even after he admitted to these 2 murders and was charged with them, Emerson never stopped denying any involvement in Jackie's disappearance until the very end. Of course, an imprisoned killer refusing to admit culpability in other murders should not be taken as conclusive evidence that he wasn't responsible for them, but the original lead detective on Jackie's case, Tommy Reeves, who was a 40-year veteran at that point, had developed enough of a rapport with Emerson that he believed he was genuinely sincere and telling the truth about having nothing to do with what happened to Jackie. Even if you put that aside, Jackie's disappearance doesn't seem to fit the MO of Emerson's other crimes, as he bludgeoned Katrina Benson and stabbed her 43 times and left her in a ditch, and he murdered Robert Louis Jones inside his home without trying to conceal either of the victims' bodies. So if he attacked Jackie in her home and abducted her, of disposing of her so thoroughly that she hasn't been found in 25 years, and then not bother doing the same thing to the other victims he killed a couple weeks later? There's also the logistics of the whole situation, as we know that Emerson was a transient who lived in a boxcar and he only picked up Benson while using a stolen vehicle. Yet the evidence in this case suggests that Jackie was taken from her home by someone driving a vehicle. And of course, since there were no signs of any struggle or violence inside Jackie's house, most people have suspected that Jackie was abducted by someone she knew personally. Even if Ross Lane Emerson was using the fake name Richard at that time, there's nothing to indicate that Jackie knew him, and I kind of doubt that she would let a drunk transient who broke parole inside her house. And if she did, I think she would have shown a lot more concern about it during her phone call with Archie instead of asking him not to come over. Even though Emerson was undeniably a vicious murderer, Jackie's disappearance just seems a lot more calculated. I definitely think there's a good chance that Jackie knew the perpetrator and willingly let them into her house before something went horribly wrong. And to give Archie the benefit of the doubt, it's been reported that Jackie dated a number of different men after she divorced her second husband and was not exclusive to Archie, so could there have been another man in her personal life who harmed her? Even if it wasn't the Richard who was already investigated and ruled out, could it have been someone else? Was Jackie possibly carrying on a secret relationship with someone whom she did not tell Archie or anyone else in her life about? Well, this leads us to our most recent lead in the investigation, and that's the release of the surveillance video of an unidentified man who showed up at both a convenience store and a Sprint cell phone store near the end of December of 2000 in order to point at Jackie's missing persons flyer and say that they needed to search the woods behind her house. It's frustrating that it took 22 years to release this video to the public, but it sounds like it was overlooked during the original investigation, and here we are over 3 years later, and we still don't know who this guy is. Police have said that this man is not a suspect, but they still want to question him. For all we know, he may have been nothing more than a bystander who thought he was offering helpful advice, but it's odd that he would share it with some random employees rather than law enforcement. I have to assume that they already searched the woods behind Jackie's house right after she went missing and found nothing, but the man's remarks have a bit more significance since tire tracks were found near these woods, and it was theorized that someone may have used them as an entry point onto Jackie's property. But when you couple in this mystery man's involvement, as well as some other details, such as the sightings of the dark-colored pickup truck at Jackie's residence, I definitely think there's still enough reasonable doubt to prevent me from being 100% completely convinced that Archie was the guilty party. On the other hand, there is a window of over 12 hours or so when Archie's whereabouts are unaccounted for, so he would have had ample time to cover his tracks before he officially reported Jackie missing, and it's clear that a cloud of suspicion surrounded him, even though there was no hard evidence that he actually did anything. If Archie was the perpetrator, then it's bittersweet that he died nearly 6 years ago, because if he did this, he took the secret about what happened to Jackie to his grave. Even if no one is actually punished for this crime, Jackie's family still deserves to learn the truth and recover her remains. So if you happen to have any information about the disappearance of Jackie Markham, please contact the Nassau County Sheriff's Office at 904-225-8984. That's 904-225-8984. Anyway, another special thanks to listener Ryan Sheesley for narrating the opening of this episode. We've been carrying on this monthly listener voiceover contest for over 8 years now, and if you've already entered, you are automatically eligible for our next random drawing, so you don't have to do anything. But if you'd like to enter and haven't already done so, all you have to do is send me an email under the subject line Trail Went Cold Contest, naming the one unsolved cold case you would most like to see featured on this podcast. So once again, send me an email under the subject line Trail Went Cold Contest to robin.warder@icloud.com. That's robin.warder@icloud.com. Now the reminder that The Trail Went Cold is on Patreon, so please visit patreon.com/thetrailwentcold to learn how you can support our podcast and become eligible for some pretty neat rewards. Over the past 8 years, our Patreon page has released over 90 exclusive bonus episodes, which are all currently available in our archives for our patrons in tiers 2 and 3. This past month, in order to commemorate our 10-year anniversary, I released a special bonus episode titled 10 Years, 10 Surreal Moments, in which I discussed some of the most notable experiences I've had since I launched The Trail Went Cold. I've also dropped an exclusive bonus episode from my spin-off podcast, The Path Went Chilly, in which myself and one of my co-hosts, Jules, discuss a case from Prince Edward Island, the 1988 murder of Byron Carr. And for our patrons in Tier 3, I've recorded another new audio commentary track which can be played over a classic episode of Unsolved Mysteries. We now have over 80 of these commentary tracks in our archives, and once again, this month I decided to do something special to commemorate our 10th anniversary by doing a commentary over a special 90-minute episode of the show. I'd also like to give a shout out to our most recent listeners who have signed up with us on Patreon this week, and they are Darcy S., Jen D., and Artemis. Thank you all so much for your support. I just wanted to give another shout out to my supporters at the Unsolved Mysteries message board at the Sitcoms Online forum and the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit. I need to provide a big thanks to Miguel Foote, who edits and assembles this podcast together for me, and Vince Nitro, who composes the eerie music you hear on every episode. If you haven't already, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, or leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Podcast Addict, or whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. So have yourselves a great week, and be sure to join us next Wednesday for another brand new episode of The Trail Went Cold.